When we picture a mega project, the first thing that comes to mind is its usefulness justifies its cost. But believe it or not, some mega projects have proved to be a complete waste of money, time, and resources. Are you ready to find out which projects sent billions down the drain? Number 1. The Ciudad Real International Airport, Spain. The European economy witnessed a massive boom in the early 2000s, giving way to several construction projects. However, a financial crisis quickly followed and reduced demand for both travel and infrastructure investment. As a result, many grand construction projects had to be abandoned, and one of them was the Ciudad Real International Airport. The airport was initially designed to decrease excess traffic away from Madrid-Barajas Airport, which was already overcrowded with local and international travelers. The new airport had one of Europe's top 5 longest runways and could facilitate up to 2 million passengers a year. Although the number seems small, if you compare it with the 70 million passenger capacity of Madrid's airport, the construction company had plans to expand the new project for an additional 8 million passengers. The airport finally became functional in 2009 at a $1.3 billion expense, but the staggering 150-mile distance from the center deterred the operations from yielding any real money. The remote location of Ciudad Real meant that passengers and airlines would have to spend an additional amount to reach the central city. Unfortunately, both weren't ready to absorb the higher cost, and most big airlines chose to carry out flight operations from the capital than Ciudad Real. As a result, the international airport soon turned into a ghost project, having remained operational for only 3 years. Can you believe the Ciudad Real Airport only saw flights from 2 airlines, Ryanair and Vueling? By 2012, the construction company had accumulated a whopping debt of $350 million and had no choice but to file for bankruptcy. The airport was finally put up for auction in 2013 for a price tag of €80 million and was picked up by Zanin International, a group of Asian and British investors, for just €10,000. However, that bid was rejected by Spain's commercial court, saying that it was too low, and after several bids falling through, the airport was sold for €56.2 million to Ciudad Real International Airport SL in September 2018. Wait until you find out what good news the pandemic brought for the new investors. The airport got a surprising revival during the COVID-19 pandemic when its new owners rebranded the structure as a home for grounded planes. Ciudad Real's dry climate, combined with the airport's long and spacious runways, proved to be the ideal setting for these planes. And by August 2020, there were 65 airplanes parked at the airport. There were plans to expand the storage facility to house over 300 aircrafts. But when the pandemic finally weakened in strength, national and international flights resumed, leaving the Ciudad Real International Airport vacant once more. The plight of Spain's new airport makes us wonder why the construction company didn't consider the distance of Ciudad Real from the center when finalizing its plans. But no matter how one tries to justify it now, in truth, the billion-dollar megaproject turned out to be a total disappointment. The next megaproject on our list is a breathtaking wonder, but does its beauty benefit anyone? Let's find out. Number 2. Interstate H3, Hawaii. The Interstate H3 is the largest and most expensive public works ever completed in Hawaii, but the project has been riddled with controversies from the get-go. Hawaii is known around the world for its tropical beauty. Hence, the construction of the freeway was viewed as a threat to destroy its natural beauty. The project was initially proposed in the early 1960s at the peak of the Cold War. The plan was to build a 6-lane highway through Moanalua Valley at a cost of $250 million. The 52-mile-long interstate would not only solve the island's projected traffic demands, but also connect major military centers to support the U.S. troops in the Pacific. The H3 interstate in particular would have enabled quick transportation of personnel and supplies in the event of a Third World War. So, while the freeway's construction might have made sense in the 1960s, it's impossible to justify it today. The H3 interstate is condemned as a road to nowhere by several groups as it doesn't immediately connect to downtown Honolulu, and the military applications are no longer relevant. When the plan was announced, it was immediately met with resistance by environmental groups and native Hawaiians worried about the implications of such a massive urban construction project. Brace yourself because this is where the real trouble started. The H3 interstate would require clearing up a substantial portion of Oahu's woods, home to several bird species and historic holy temples. These temples and funeral mounds had been preserved and worshipped in the Moanalua Valley for centuries and were sacred to native Hawaiians. Therefore, they used all their might to fight and protect their heritage. The environmental laws of the time, combined with a change of routes to protect surrounding valleys, delayed the project indefinitely. The government did come up with a solution, but we will let you decide whether it was a good one. Instead of building over the Moanalua Valley, the North Halawa Valley was selected as the new route for the highway. However, the new route had many of the same issues as Moanalua Valley, but this time, the U.S. Senate voted to exclude the H3 from environmental rules, and the freeway was given a free pass. It wasn't until 1989, almost 26 years after the proposal, that construction began. The highway was finally opened for the public in 1997, and it was hard to challenge the breathtaking beauty of the route and the engineering marvel of the H3 interstate. If you consider the difficult terrain on which it was built and the advanced technologies used in its construction, it is easy to guess the project required a hefty budget. How much do you think the entire project cost? The total construction cost was $1.3 billion, almost $50 million per kilometer, making the H3 highway the most expensive in the world. But despite the project's insane budget, it doesn't benefit anyone. Here's why. Firstly, the defense considerations of the 1960s are no longer relevant. Secondly, it doesn't connect to downtown Honolulu. And lastly, and most importantly, a majority of native Hawaiians refuse to use the interstate. The locals believe the highway is cursed because several sacred sites and temples were destroyed during its construction. So while there is no denying the remarkable feat of the H3 highway, it is hard to ignore the uselessness of the megaproject. What if we told you the desertedness of the H3 highway is nothing compared to the next megaproject on our list? Do you find that hard to believe? If yes, get ready to have your mind blown. Number 3. Naypyidaw, Myanmar. Welcome to one of the world's most peculiar capital cities, Naypyidaw. Built from scratch in the middle of rice paddies and sugarcane fields, Naypyidaw, often translated as Seat of the King, was established as Burma's new capital in November 2005 by the then military regime. It's easy to forget you're in the middle of one of Southeast Asia's poorest countries when you drive through Naypyidaw. The grandiosity of the megaproject is unparalleled, with a string of tall buildings on either side of the road, villa-style hotels, and shopping malls, all painted in soft pastel colors. The city is more like an aesthetic dream, but only real. Naypyidaw extends to an astounding 4,800 square kilometers, which means it's 6 times the size of New York City. Everything in the city is large and grand, from 20-lane highways to over-the-top boulevards. It has a safari park, a zoo complete with air-conditioned penguin habitat, and at least 4 golf courses. The city has an airport that can handle 3.5 million passengers a year, and even has a 99-meter-tall replica of a landmark situated initially in Yangon. But there's one thing missing in this extraordinary city: people. The massive highways are entirely empty, and you'd be lucky to spot even one vehicle on the 20-lane road. The streets are always silent, and there is no one to visit the exquisite restaurants, hotels, and shopping malls the military regime has built. The airport hardly sees a dozen people flying on a busy day, and the shopping malls are only visited by diplomatic staff on weekends. Believe it or not, the city paints an eerie picture of post-apocalypse suburban America. The only houses in Naypyidaw are the ones that were there before the city was transformed into the new capital. Time to address the elephant in the room. Why is Naypyidaw deserted? To understand the reason, it's essential to unfold the country's complex political and military dilemma. For decades, Myanmar has been tightly controlled by the ruling military regime known as the Tatmadaw, famous for its human rights violations and repression of civilians. Naypyidaw was an ambitious military project, highlighting the isolation and detachment of the ruling elite and the general population. The new capital city is home to military leaders who reside in opulent compounds and government buildings. At the same time, most Myanmar citizens face limited access to basic services and live below the poverty line. The main purpose behind the construction of Naypyidaw was to move power from the former capital, Yangon, which has a population of 7 million. Since Yangon had reached its infrastructural capacity, moving the capital to another location where more people could make a living made sense. The military poured almost $4 billion into the city, but didn't concern themselves with an effective healthcare system, educational institutes, or job opportunities, components crucial for survival. Hence, people in Myanmar are reluctant to move to the new capital city permanently. Even diplomats from other countries residing in Naypyidaw find the city's emptiness uncomfortable. It has been rightfully dubbed a ghost town, and there is no doubt that this royal capital is a purposeless and failed megaproject. The next project on our list still has some hope of revival, but that doesn't change the fact that it's currently one of the world's biggest dollar sinkholes. Number 4. Forest City, Malaysia. Some megaprojects are too good to be true, and that's precisely the case for this green, futuristic smart city that was meant to rise from reclaimed land on 4 artificial islands. Forest City is set in a lucrative location, which is why investors were highly keen on the idea of owning properties there. The proposed city is close to Singapore, which has the world's second busiest port and a thriving economy. Therefore, it was imperative for developers to establish transportation links between the two and capitalize on Singapore's proximity to Forest City. Part of the plan was a bridge that connects the cities, reducing travel time to only 20 minutes. In addition, Forest City was designed to have its own customs facility to allow residents to move freely to Singapore and back. But more importantly, as the city's name suggests, Forest City was an ambitious project that would focus on nature and the project's eco-friendliness. Did you know the design features buildings with green rooftops and vertical gardens? City streets are constructed in multiple layers, with the bottom layer for traffic and parking spaces, while the upper layers feature parks, sports facilities, and transport hubs. The government wanted the project to be powered exclusively with renewable energy and was willing to pour a staggering $100 billion into it. The initial proposed completion date was 2035, and by 2022, one of 4 islands was close to completion, with 50 apartment buildings, golf courses, and beaches. So what went wrong? How did the Forest City land on our list of useless megaprojects? Here's the truth behind its untimely failure. Forest City wasn't designed for locals, but for Chinese residents looking to make the city their new home. The project was entirely funded through China, and Chinese residents had a free pass to the city during the initial years of construction. So the Chinese population that could not own properties in their homeland changed course and bought residential homes in Forest City. As a result, almost 80% of property owners in Forest City were Chinese. Can you believe that even the street signs were in Mandarin? And if that wasn't enough, Mandarin was added to school curriculums across the city to facilitate the influx of Chinese residents. Naturally, native Malaysians weren't happy about the Chinese overtaking their city. On the one hand, they couldn't afford the hefty price tag on the properties in Forest City, and on the other hand, it was becoming apparent that the entire project was designed keeping the Chinese markets in mind. Opponents of this project inside the government dubbed it a new form of colonialism. Hence, when the leadership returned to Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad, he decided to undo the damage that had been done. He banned foreigners from owning properties in the Forest City and capped foreign investments at $50,000 per year. Consequently, foreigners began leaving the city, and new investors weren't all too sure about the Forest City anymore. Troubles compounded when the pandemic of COVID-19 hit, and worldwide travel bans set the project back many years. Hence, the smart city designed for 700,000 people had less than 500 living in residential homes by the start of 2020. The plan of a futuristic city certainly sounded exciting, but political challenges combined with the effects of a global pandemic turned Forest City into an unachievable, hence useless mega project. If you think Forest City is the epitome of sunk investment, the next mega project on our list might change your mind. Number 5. The Yucca Mountain Nuclear Waste Repository. Nuclear waste poses serious challenges and risks regarding its management and disposal. Hence, the U.S. desperately needed a permanent solution to its nuclear waste problem. The Congress decided to establish a nuclear waste fund in 1982, where anyone consuming electricity from nuclear energy would pay a small amount of money to deal with the waste. At the same time, the federal government began exploring 9 sites for permanent waste disposal, eventually narrowing it down to 3. Yucca Mountains in Nevada was the first choice, with sites in Washington and Texas following close behind. However, members of Congress were concerned that analyzing multiple sites for the project would cost too much. Therefore, the 1982 law was amended in 1987 to focus all its attention on the Yucca Mountains, since it was closest to the U.S. most used nuclear testing site and away from population centers. The amendment is now commonly referred to as the Screw Nevada Bill, and here's the backstory. The original plan was to deposit waste from across the country in a tunnel complex about 300 meters under Yucca Mountain. Apart from its remote location, Yucca Mountain is made up of volcanic ash formed millions of years ago, which means the site can absorb any radioactive waste without crumbling or cracking. The nuclear waste site sounds perfect in theory, doesn't it? But it doesn't explain why Nevada was chosen for the mega project, even though there are no nuclear sites there. Did you know that the U.S. has more than 100 operational and closed nuclear reactor sites across 34 states, but not one of them is in Nevada? Then why was this site picked up from the 9 initially proposed ones? Although Congress passed the new bill, it was met with significant resistance from other congressional representatives and the general public. They believed the Yucca Mountains were unsuitable for nuclear waste disposal because official hydrological and geological surveys revealed the chances of contamination of a nearby water source. The same water source flows into Amargosa Valley, which has been home to Native Americans for centuries. Despite pushback, then-President George W. Bush signed a resolution establishing the Yucca Mountain Repository in 2002, and construction began on site. However, when Obama came into power, he ended up cutting funding for Yucca Mountain in his 2010 budget, and eventually, the federal government was forced to stop collecting money for the Nuclear Waste Fund. Although construction of the repository resumed 3 years later, very little progress has been made so far. And it seems the future isn't too bright for the megaproject, since the Biden administration has made it clear that Yucca Mountain isn't part of the country's plans anymore. While it is a victory for the people of Nevada, there's no denying the U.S. government wasted over $17 billion on a megaproject that's a far cry from being useful. Which megaproject do you think was a dumb idea to begin with, and which one do you want to see developed in the near future? Let us know your opinions in the comments below. Thanks for joining us today. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and press the notification bell for more shocking videos from around the world.